Hi. So we're going to do a little bit of math together today. Um, we're going to be subtracting decimals, which is really pretty much the same as subtracting whole numbers. Just the important part is lining up the decimals, as we've kind of talked about with adding decimals. So we're going to look at doing a few practice problems together. So I'm going to share my screen. Or try to. It usually works. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and we're going to look at this page in the book. This is showing you the steps, and it's showing you using counters, using manipulatives, how to regroup, right? So just a little review about regrouping. So let's say that we line up these numbers, and first thing we're going to do obviously is subtract the hundredths, because we always want to start on the right when we subtract. Now, if I have 4 counters, I can't subtract 6 from that, right? Because I can't take 6 away from 4. So what we do is we regroup, and you can see in this picture, we've borrowed a tenth and we've brought it over here, and that gives us 14. Right? When we bring this over, we have 14. Now we can subtract. 14 minus 6 is 8. Now we don't have this tenth that's in a square. We have this, right? We have 1/10 all by itself. So we have 1 minus 0, and that equals 1. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to subtract the whole number, the number that's in the ones place, right? So this was our second step right here. We went ahead and we have a 1 up here, and we said 1 minus 0 is 1, right? And we have 1 left. And then what we're going to do is we're going to subtract 2 minus 1, and that's why this is X'd out here. And that's going to give us 1. And now we have 1 and 1800ths. All right, so it's pretty much regrouping is the exact same thing that you do with whole numbers. It doesn't make any difference that it's a decimal number. The critical point is lining up the decimals, and you can see that both of these numbers are lined up. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and flip over onto the next page. We're going to do page 71. And so we're going to work on 71. We were going to do all these problems that are on here. So I'm going to go ahead and fold my paper. And I'm going to fold it into 8 squares. I'm going to make sure that I put my name in the corner. And this is lesson 8.2. And we're going to be doing 69 through 71, but we're mostly doing 71. Okay. All right. So we're going to start out with 25 and 26. And then we'll continue with 1 through 11. Okay, so I'm just numbering my first page. All right, so this is pretty much just going to be straight up subtraction, right? Now, the emphasis that I want to have is that we make sure that we're stacking the numbers. So on number 25, we really have to stack because we have 7 and 5/10, and we're going to be subtracting 3 and 68/100. And I'm writing it nice and large. And I'm setting up my problem with my arrow, right? And if I would like, which I do like, I'm going to put an invisible 0 there, right? Because that makes it easier for me to know that I have nothing there if I put a 0 there. It helps. Trying to find room for my math book on my desk here. It's kind of crowded. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start subtracting. I can't subtract 8 from 0, right? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to come over next door and I'm going to regroup. This becomes this tenth, 5/10 becomes 4/10, right? And then I take that tenth over here and it makes 10 hundredths. So now I have 10 minus 8, and that's perfect. That's 2. Now I come over here and I can't subtract in the tenths place because I have 4 minus 6, and that's not going to work. So I'm going to regroup over here. This whole number 7 becomes whole number 6, and I'm going to take one whole number over here, and that's going to be worth 10 tenths. So now I have 14 minus 6, and that's going to give me 8. And then I go ahead and I subtract 6 minus 3, and I get 3. So my answer is 3 82 hundredths. Now, if you're a bad subtractor, I'm not a great subtractor. So one of the things I like to do is I like to check my work. And I used to do this all the time when I was little Karen, because I wanted to make sure that my work was correct, but I was not very good at subtracting and regrouping. So what I would do is I would take these two numbers right here, 3 and 68 hundredths. I would take these two numbers, I would add them together, and that should give me 7.50 when I add them together, if I did it correctly. So 8 plus 2 is 10, regrouped. This is going to be 15, regrouped, and this is going to be 7. So I know that if I get this top number, when I add these two numbers together, then I did it correctly. So I subtracted correctly and I regrouped correctly. So that's kind of a good strategy to use for checking your work. Now we're going to do number 26, which is really tricky. It's 2, and 2 is the same thing as 2.00. And we're going to subtract 0 and 55 hundredths from that. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my problem with 2 zeros here and a decimal point. Whole number 2 is the same thing as 2 and no hundredths. I want to be able to stack the decimals. So if you put the 2 over here, you're going to get an incorrect answer. So let's start out. We can't subtract 5 minus 0, right? If I have 0, I can't give 5 away. So I can't subtract 5. So I'm going to come over here, and I've got a problem here because I have 0, right? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to go ahead over here. If I borrowed from there, I have 9, right? So now I'm going to take 9 minus 5 and I get 4. And now I'm going to take, I had to regroup over here to get the 9. So now I'm going to go ahead and subtract, and I get 1 and 45 hundredths. Now let's do our double check step to make sure. We're going to add these together, and we're going to hope that the answer gives us, I still use my blue pen, 5 plus 5 is 10, regroup. 5 plus 5 is 10, regroup. Did I get 2.00? Yes. Okay, so I know that that equals my top number. So when I had a 0 over here, I had to regroup from the number next door, right? I kind of did that a little bit afterwards in the step. So, all right, let's look at number 1. Number 1, we have 8/10, and we're going to subtract 5/10. So just like with adding, we're going to always line up the decimal points. And we know that 8 minus 5 is 3. So we know that we end up with 3/10 when we get our answer. We know if we added 3/10 plus 5/10, we'd get 8/10. So we know we did it correctly. Let's look at number 2. Number 2, we have 9/100ths. And we're going to subtract 3/100ths from that. So again, I'm always using my little arrow line, which helps me to remember to line up my decimals. It's very handy. So if I have 9 minus 3, that's going to give me 6. And then I have to make sure that I fill in with my placeholder. 0 minus 0 is 0. And 0 minus 0 is 0. So I end up with 6/100ths. It's really important that we line up the decimals, because if we didn't, we might not end up with hundredths here. And we want to, if we start out with hundredths and we're subtracting hundredths, we want our answer to be hundredths as well. Okay, let's look at number 3. Number 3 is getting kind of juicy. They're giving us some tricky numbers. So we have 5 and 86/100ths, and now we have 2 and 14/100ths. And we're going to subtract those. All right. So again, we always start over here on this side at the right. 6 minus 4 is 2. 8 minus 1 is 7. 5 minus 2 is 3. Again, you can take these numbers. 4 plus 2 is 6. 7 plus 1 is 8. 2 plus 3 is 5. And that's going to give you the top number, right? Addition and subtraction are inverse operations. And so you can use addition to check your work if you have a difficult time subtracting, and it works really well. Okay, now they're giving us some numbers and they're asking us to stack them. So we have 7 and 8/10, and we have 3 and, oops, sorry, suddenly the lights went out. We have 3 and 4/10, and we're going to subtract those. So again, we make sure that we're lining up the decimals. 8 minus 4 is 4. 7 minus 3 is 4. If you want to check your work, you can add these two together. And I like checking my work. 4 plus 4 is 8. 4 plus 3 is 7. This matches this. So I know I did it correctly. It only takes a couple of seconds to do that, to double check, and it really helps, especially if you're doing a really difficult problem with lots of regrouping. These are not difficult. I would say these are difficult with lots of regrouping. Look, we regrouped twice on both of these. So it really helps to check your work. $3.94 is our next problem. And we're going to subtract $2.71. All right, so I set it up. I put the dollar sign so that we know we're talking about money. And I'm going to go ahead and subtract. 4 minus 1 is 3. 9 minus 7 is 2. 3 minus 2 is 1. So I end up with $1.23. And again, if I want to check my work really quickly, 3 plus 1 is 4, 7 plus 2 is 9, 2 plus 1 is 3. And if my number matches the top number, then I've done it correctly. Okay, I'm going to flip, and we're going to do number 6. We'll do 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. All right, so let's look at number 6. We have 1 and 5/10. So now we're going to see some regrouping. Now they're taking it up a notch. So I'm going to have to regroup, right? Because I have a larger number on the bottom. I can't take 8 away from 5. So I'm going to come over here to the whole number 1, the ones place, and I'm going to regroup. And this is going to become 0. I'm going to take this over here. I'm hauling it over to the tenths place, and it's going to be worth 10/10. And that's why this goes from being 5 to 15, because it's worth 10/10. Our number system is always based on 10. So 15 minus 8 is going to be, let's see, 7, right? And 0 minus 0 is 0. Now we can double check. 8 plus 8 is 16, so I know that 8 plus 7 is 15. I add 1 plus 0 and 0, and I get 1.5. So I know that I did it correctly. Okay, let's look at number 7. I have 42 hundredths. And I always draw my arrow in the first decimal I draw my arrow, because I know that my next decimal has to go right here on this arrow. So number 7, I'm taking away 7 hundredths. So if I put the arrow down and I put the decimals on it, then I know exactly where my decimals need to go throughout the entire process of doing the problem. So I cannot take 7 away from 2. I don't have enough there. So I'm going to regroup. I'm going to come over here to the tenths place, and I'm going to take away a tenth. When I take away a tenth, I have 3/10 left. Then I'm going to drag those tenths over. There's going to be 10/10. So they're going to be worth 100th. So this becomes 12 minus 7 instead of 2 minus 7. So 12 minus 7 is, let's see, 5, right? I haven't subtracted in a long time. I'm a little rusty. Now, this one is fine. 3 minus 0 is 3, and 0 minus 0 is 0. So again, I'm going to double check. 7 plus 5 is 12. 3 plus 1 plus 0 is 4. And 0 plus 0 is 0. So if you use an inverse operation to check your work, you should get the top number when you add them together. Okay, let's look at number 8. I can feel they're getting harder. More difficult. 2 and 43 hundredths, and 1 and 65 hundredths. And I'm putting my arrow in. So I'm going to go ahead and subtract. I can't take 5 from 3 because 3 is too small. So I'm going to come over here to my neighbor, to the tenths place. I'm going to take a tenth away, and I'm going to cash it in for 10 hundredths. When I do that, I get 13 minus 5, which is 8. Now, I can't take 6 away from 3, so I'm going to have to come over here to the ones place, cash this in, take 1, and drag it over here, and it's going to be worth 10, 10 tenths. So that makes this into 13. And 13 minus 6 is, let's see, 7. 1 minus 1 is 0. So let's double check that. Whenever I do a lot of regrouping, I like to double check it. So if I add 5 plus 8, I get 13. If I add 7 plus 1, I get 8, plus 6 is 14. And if I add 1 plus 1 plus 0, I get 2. So my original, you look at the original number before you started regrouping. So 2 and 43 hundredths, 2 and 43 hundredths. If they match, you know you've done it correctly. Number 9 is a little bit tricky. We have 5 and 3 tenths. And we're subtracting 1 and 86 hundredths. I feel like there's, I have allergies today. So I'm sorry if my nose is kind of sniffly. So I'm going to put a little placeholder 0 here because that just makes me feel better. It makes me feel better. If I have nothing there and I'm trying to regroup, it's a little hard for me to figure out what I'm doing. So if I put a 0 here, I know then that I can't subtract 6 from nothing, right? You can't take 6 away from 0. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to regroup. This becomes 2 tenths. And then I drag one of them over here and it becomes 10 hundredths. So now I have 10 minus 6. That I can do. Now this one, I can't subtract 8 from 2. So I'm going to come over here to the ones place. I'm going to take 1 away and I'm going to cash it in and it's going to become 10 tenths. And so instead of this being 2, it's now worth 12 because I'm adding 10 to it. 12 minus 8 is, let's see, 4. And 4 minus 1 is 3. So let's double check. We add them together. 6 plus 4 is 10. 8 plus 5 is 13. And 3 plus 1 is 4, plus another one is 5. So did we get 5.3? Yes. So we know we did it correctly. I'm telling you, this is a lifesaver. If you struggle with subtracting and with knowing when to regroup, this can really help you because if these don't add up, then you can go back in and see where you made your mistake and you can fix it, right? You'll look back in here and you'll say, oh, I regrouped that wrong, or oh, I should have regrouped that and I didn't, right? So so far ours have been checking out and they've been correct. But usually if it doesn't add up, then you can look back in here and you can see exactly where you made your mistake. All right, let's look at number 10. Now they're trying to trick us, right? They're giving us 8 minus 2 and 4 tenths. So 8 is the same thing as 8.0, right? We can put a 0 on there. This is the ones place. This is the tenths place. And now we're going to subtract 2 and 4 tenths from that. Also, one other trick I like to do, this is a really simple thing, but make your work big. This looks like a first grader is doing it, right? I'm making it really big. But one of the tricks, one of the key things that makes this easier is so that you can see what you're doing. So don't be afraid to work large. Look at how big my numbers are. I didn't write them like this. They're not little tiny numbers right here that I'm subtracting from, right? Little specks. If you make your numbers nice and big, it's easier to see where you've made mistakes. Okay, so I cannot subtract 4 from 0, so I'm going to regroup. This becomes 7 ones, right? And then I'm going to drag 10 over here, and I'm going to have 10 tenths. Now I can subtract. 10 minus 4 is 6, and 7 minus 2 is 5. And again, I'm going to double check. 4 plus 6 is 10. And this is going to be 8. And it matches up to my top number. Okay, let's do number 11, the last one. 24 and 67 hundredths minus 8 and 79 hundredths. Now you guys know that because this is a video, if you want to do this on your own, you can also use me to check your work. So if you want to do this on your own and then forward the video, like turn the video off and then fast forward it to see the answers so that you can check your work, that's perfectly acceptable, right? I'm not teaching you anything new that you don't already know. We all know how to subtract, right? Some of us are better at it than others, but we all know, we understand the concept of subtraction. We haven't subtracted decimals too much, so that's kind of the new part of this. So you're welcome to fast forward ahead and look for the answers. That's fine too. All right, so this one's going to be a tricky one, I can tell, because it's at the end. And also because I see bigger numbers on the bottom, right? So I can't subtract 9 from 7. I'm going to regroup over here. This 6 becomes a 5. And I'm dragging 10. I'm exchanging this for 10 hundredths. So now 17 minus 9 is 8. And I can't subtract 7 from 5, so I'm going to regroup over here. This becomes a 3. And I'm going to drag 10 over to cash them in. And now this is 15. 15 minus 7 is, let's see, that's going to be 8, right? Now I can't subtract 8 minus 3, right? Can't do it. So I'm going to come over here, regroup. This becomes a 1. And this becomes a 13. 13 minus 8 is 5. And now 1 minus nothing is 1. So that was 3. We regrouped 3 times. So I'm really going to check that one. Now, one of the things that you probably noticed, when I was a little kid, I didn't regroup one at a time. I would just take a number and I'd regroup all the way across. Even when I didn't need to, I would still regroup. And that caused me a lot of problems. So you probably noticed that I was stopping and assessing each place value. If I need to regroup, I regroup. If I don't need to regroup, I don't regroup. Don't be like little Karen and just regroup everything. Okay? So let's see if this matches up. 9 plus 8 is 17. 8 plus 8 is 16. 8 plus 5 is 13, plus 1 is 14. Regroup, and we get 24 and 67 hundredths. And that's what this number was before I regrouped it to death, right? Because we regrouped a lot. There's a lot of crossouts. All right, so I hope that using this strategy can kind of help you if you struggle with subtracting. I still struggle with subtracting. And so I use this all the time when I do my work. I used to do it all the time in class. Even when my first couple of years teaching, I did it all the time, and kids would say, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm checking my work." So then I started showing kids how to do it because I think it's a really good strategy to check your work. And it doesn't take very long. It took me like what, 8 seconds to add the two numbers together. You're adding your answer plus the smaller number on the bottom. And that should give you the larger number on the top that you subtracted from. All right. So I hope that you enjoyed subtracting decimals. It's a very useful skill because you're probably going to become a grown-up and make big, huge piles of money, and people are going to be subtracting from your money. You're going to have to do things like pay rent, buy groceries, buy clothes for your kids, buy a car, make your car payment. You're going to be subtracting with decimals your whole life. So it's a good life skill. So I hope this helped you, and I hope you enjoyed doing it. And I hope you also learned a little bit about using a check step and how that can help you. All right. So thanks for joining me.